You may be thinking of planting your perennials outdoors, and it's possible even in my cold climate here in Zone 3 over in Canada. But there are some rules you want to follow if you choose to plant perennials in the fall. The planting of fall perennials is not in any way limited to just tubers, bulbs, or seeds. You can actually plant perennials with root mass in the fall time. But there are some rules you want to follow if you're going this route. So number one is actually how you choose your plant from the store. This time of year is when a lot of the plants are on sale, and this is because they have so much damage and they're trying to blow them out. And there's nothing wrong with getting plants on sale so long as you're getting a good deal. But if you're paying full price for your perennials, you definitely want to consider getting a plant that is robust and large. So when you look at all the plant specimens in front of you for the perennial plant you want to grab, you always want to grab the one that is the healthiest looking, that in particular has the largest root system. So one hack to doing this is actually going to the grocery store and popping the plant out of the container and taking a look at the roots. What you want to look for is not necessarily new growth, but you just want to make sure that this pot space is completely filled with root biomass, because that is a good sign that this plant is going to make it over the winter. The next thing you want to look at, the next thing to consider is planting that plant at least 6 weeks before your first frost. So here in Saskatchewan, I'm already past my first frost date. That was back in September. However, it hasn't quite gotten that cold where the ground is in any way, shape, or form frozen, so I could plant these in place. So the next thing you want to consider is the actual physical planting. And if you're in a climate where the soil freezes, you are at risk of heaving. Now, heaving is when the root ball actually is pushed out of the soil. So if you've ever planted a plant in the summer or fall, and the next spring you come out and it looks like it's almost been pushed out of the ground. This can go for even annual root balls where the upper plant just doesn't even exist anymore. This is what we call heaving. Now, heaving happens when the soil freezes and it forces the root ball out through pressure. Now, there's a number of different reasons why this happens, but the main one is that your mixture is really heterogeneous, meaning the root ball has a very different water holding capacity, organic material, everything compared to the surrounding soil. So the best way to prevent this or reduce it is actually making homogeneous mixture of the soil and the root ball. So this happens when we dig a hole that's 2 times bigger than the root ball. We add in our compost or manure, something really heavy and organic material, pop it in, and then cover it up. Heaving will happen because there is no homogeneous mixture between surrounding soil that is soil-based, completely inorganic, meaning made of rock that's been ground down, and the actual root ball segment. So to prevent this would be to add very little to no compost or manure. And we'll get into why that is particularly important. And using something like a peat or coconut coir or leaf mold, which I taught you guys how to do recently, a replacement for potting soil, and mixing that in with the surrounding soil, 50-50, and then popping that root ball in that has been fluffed up in some way, popping it in and then covering it over. This will help reduce heaving because now all the water should freeze and cool down at relatively the same pace to the surrounding soil, so we won't end up with pressure forcing that root ball out. Now the next one is do not fertilize. I know, sounds confusing, and this is why I said no compost, no manure. Fertilizer can actually cause rapid new growth, and we don't want rapid new growth, both for the roots or the foliage on the plant. This is incredibly important. This is because new growth will get nipped off by the cool nights that are to come, and this freezing of both the root biomass and the greens is incredibly damaging and will prevent your plant from overwintering properly. Now, you don't want to starve your plant completely. You do want to supplement it in some way with more so just plain old water. And you want to water it until things really start to cool down, and then you want to back off and let that plant go into a normal dormancy at its own pace. So that is something that is so important. If there's anything I could stress more, is no fertilizer in your perennials you're planting in the fall. Now, plants you shouldn't plant in the fall is anything that blooms. So if you have a plant that flowers like a hydrangea or an azalea, for example, these are best planted in spring. They don't do well with a fall plant. But anything vegetable based will do just fine, whether it's leverage or a shrub, rhubarb, strawberries as an example, will all be a-okay being planted here in the fall time. Now, the last thing you want to look at is mulching. Now, I did a video on mulching, and if you haven't watched that, go check that out. But mulching will also help to prevent that heaving, along with protecting any new growth that may have accidentally happened in and around that space, whether it's above ground or below ground. Keep in mind, just because you don't see above ground growth doesn't mean below ground isn't doing something. Roots very commonly are expanding rapidly during the fall season, and a lot of focus is put into root development from the plant in the fall rather than the spring. So just because you don't see growth above ground does not mean that something's not happening below ground. So you want to make sure you mulch. And with perennials, you want to go 5 inches minimum. And the reason for this is it will prevent heaving, but it'll also help that plant to overwinter. And when things do get cold here in the next little bit, if you don't typically get a lot of snowfall, but you get a lot of cold, it will help to buffer those roots and cool them down slowly. And this is true when you get snow. If you pile snow on top, that can also help to lessen the blow of sudden cooling, which will ultimately save your roots and your plant to help it overwinter long term. But if you want to learn more on overwintering perennials, especially if those of you in areas that get a lot of freeze thaw, Chinooks, things like that, then I have a video coming out on that very soon because you guys did request that. So do check that out. But mulching, very key. And this type of mulch you use is also very important. The mulch should have lots of air space, meaning either really high surface area, meaning shredded leaves or grass clippings, or should be a straw or something hollow that has lots of air space in between, like a flax or a wheat straw. Now, you want to try to avoid things like wood chips or things of that nature. It doesn't have as much air holding capacity, which ultimately means it's not as good of an insulator. So do keep that in mind. If you guys enjoyed this video on fall planting perennials, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and comment below if you plant in the fall or if you tend to leave everything till winter. I'm gonna do a video on how to store containers of perennials in the event that you don't have time to plant them underground. So stay tuned for that. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.